Greetings everyone, I'm Detective STARBORN, and I'm glad to see you on my YouTube channel. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on new and interesting videos. Thank you, and enjoy watching. Celine Figard was born on May 23, 1976, in the French city of Besançon. It was a rather quiet and peaceful place, located not far from the border with Switzerland. Celine had loving parents, as well as 2 brothers and a sister. Their father was a farmer, and the children spent a lot of time outdoors, helping him with various tasks. In school, the girl was actively involved in sports and had many friends. When she was 14, Celine visited neighboring Britain and really liked it there. She began to think about moving there in the future and decided to get an education that would allow her to work in the hotel business. Celine chose this direction because her cousin worked as a hotel manager in Britain, and she liked this profession. After graduating from school, the girl entered a local university to study accounting and continued to regularly visit her cousin in England. Once he helped her get a job at a hotel for the summer holidays, and Celine spent several months there before returning home. At the end of 1995, when she was 19, she decided to go to Britain again for Christmas. At that time of year in France, there were interruptions in the work of public trains, so her parents turned to a truck driver they knew who was going to deliver cargo to England. He agreed to give the girl a ride to a town called Folkestone, from where the girl planned to get to a town called Fordingbridge, where her cousin lived, about 250 kilometers from Folkestone. On December 18th, the girl left home and was supposed to get to her brother's hotel by the evening of the same day. Her parents were waiting for her call, but for some reason Celine was clearly delayed. She didn't have a mobile phone, so all they could do was wait for the girl to get to the hotel. Closer to night, they received a call, but on the other end of the line was not Celine, but her brother. He said that the girl had not arrived and asked if her plans had changed. Celine's parents began to worry even more and, having no other options, decided to immediately contact the police. French investigators passed the information to their British colleagues, and they began the search for the girl. First of all, they talked to Celine's parents, who immediately arrived in England. They told them that their acquaintance had agreed to give the girl a ride to Britain, and the police found this man. He said that he had taken Celine to Folkestone, after which he had to go in a different direction. At the truck stop, he met another driver from France who was heading to a town called Newbury, an hour's drive from Celine's brother's hotel. The driver agreed to give her a ride, and the investigators found this man. He said that he had dropped the girl off at the truck stop in Newbury, where Celine tried to call her brother from a payphone. She wanted to ask if he could come and pick her up, but for some reason, she couldn't get through to him. At that point, it was already 5:30, and the driver told Celine that she could get to her brother's town by train. But the nearest station was in the neighboring county, and the driver had to deliver goods in a different direction, so he couldn't take her. When the man decided to ask other drivers at the parking lot to take her, the first person he approached refused because he was planning to rest before the trip. Then he went to the second man, and he said that he was going to Salisbury, just half an hour's drive from her brother's town. Moreover, the driver added that the girl could make it in time for the 8 o'clock bus. In the end, Celine went with him, and that's where her trail breaks off. Detectives tried to find the last driver who gave the girl a ride, but they had no precise information to determine his identity. The other driver did not remember the license plates, and only said that he was driving a white Mercedes truck. He also provided a description of this person. He was a man aged 30 to 35 with short blonde hair and a beard. In addition, the driver added that this person seemed very suspicious to him. Something in his behavior made him worry, but he still let Celine go with him because she simply had no other choice. The police began to suspect that this person might be involved in the girl's disappearance, and made a composite sketch based on the witness's description. As for the first 2 drivers, they checked them for possible involvement, but both men were in other places, and their alibis were confirmed by a lot of evidence. Soon they found out a fact that increased suspicion towards the third driver. He said that Celine would be able to get from Salisbury to her brother's hotel on the evening bus, but in reality, there were no routes from that city at all. Investigators spread information about Celine's disappearance in newspapers and TV channels, attaching a composite sketch of the suspect. This case immediately spread all over Britain, and there were several reasons for that. Firstly, there were only a few days left before Christmas, and the disappearance of a young girl at this time of year attracted increased attention. Secondly, in about the same area over the past 2 years, several murders of young girls had been committed, and the police believed that they were dealing with a serial killer. Now, they did not rule out that the same criminal could be behind Celine's disappearance, so the local police department threw all its forces into the search. More than 100 police officers were assigned to the case. Helicopters were used to survey the area from the air and even an airplane. They all combed the road along which the driver presumably went with Celine, but they could not find any traces of the missing girl. The first week of searches did not yield any results at all. Police and Celine's relatives regularly appealed to the public to share any information about her whereabouts or that driver, but all the leads led investigators to a dead end. This went on for more than a week, until the morning of December 29th, when the police received a call. A man was driving on the highway near the city of Worcester and stopped to adjust the windshield wipers. Walking past the side of the road, he noticed something strange next to the road, covered with snow, and went closer. To his horror, the man realized that there was a human body in front of him and immediately went home to call the police. Officers arrived at the scene and found the body of a young girl, but they could not quickly identify her. At first, they thought it was the body of a local girl who had disappeared after visiting a nightclub. However, this version was quickly refuted. Only the next day, on December 30th, the police were able to confirm that the girl found was Celine. She was identified by her cousin, as the detectives decided to spare the girl's parents the need to do it themselves. The police immediately noted the fact that the highway near which the body was found was almost in the opposite direction from Celine's destination. This only reinforced the theory that the girl could have been killed by the truck driver who agreed to give her a last ride. Medical experts began to examine the body, and a very grim picture opened up before them. All of Celine's clothes and personal belongings were missing, and the police could not find any of them near the place where the body was found. Experts found several abrasions from heavy blows, as well as signs of strangulation. In addition, the victim was raped, but they could not find any traces of the criminal's biological material. At the same time, experts found that the body had been lying next to that road for only about a day. Considering that 11 days had passed since Celine's disappearance, investigators suggested that the killer could have kept her alive for most of that time. Or he could have been carrying the body with him. Based on the description of the second driver, an industrial refrigerator was attached to the alleged kidnapper's truck, which means he could have kept the body there at a negative temperature for all this time. With all this, the police still had practically no clues as to the identity of the driver. After talking to the victim's parents, they learned one interesting fact. Celine was carrying 2 bottles of champagne with her for Christmas, and like all the girl's other things, they were never found. Most likely, the criminal took them with him, and this opened up an additional opportunity for investigators to identify him. The fact is that champagne of this brand was sold only in France and was not exported to Britain, making these 2 bottles unique throughout the country. The police spread information about this champagne in the media, attaching photos of the bottles. They were counting on the fact that the criminal could have shown them to someone or treated friends or relatives. However, this clue also led nowhere. Despite the fact that no traces of the criminal's DNA were found on the victim's body, investigators decided to take an experimental step. At the beginning of January of the following year, they organized the country's first ever mass DNA collection. The police focused their efforts on Ford Mercedes drivers, as well as similar models. This process took more than a month, and during this time, detectives managed to check more than 5,000 drivers. Most of them voluntarily agreed to provide their samples, but there were those who refused, resulting in these people being placed on a separate list for further verification. Against the backdrop of an active investigation, Celine's case was receiving more and more publicity in the British and French media. Thousands of calls with various tips came to the police, and investigators tried to check each of them. This went on until mid-February, until one of these tips attracted special attention from detectives. They were called by a man who saw the composite sketch of the suspect and said that this person looked very much like his colleague, a 36-year-old truck driver named Stuart Little. He added that the man drove a Mercedes truck with a refrigerator, and the police began to study this person. First of all, they found out that the man had an impressive criminal history, but it consisted of non-violent crimes. Then they decided to go to him and ask him to submit a DNA sample, acting very carefully. The police did not rush things and pretended that Stuart was just one of thousands of drivers they were checking. However, the man refused to submit his sample, which only increased suspicion against him. Despite this, after a few more attempts to convince him to submit DNA, the man finally agreed. Immediately after that, the police received a warrant to search his truck, and there they found the first serious evidence. Traces of blood were found on the mattress of his sleeping place and in several other places in the cab. Analysis showed that it belonged to Celine, and that was enough for an arrest. The police also obtained a warrant to search Stuart's home. In the garage, they found Celine's personal belongings that she had with her at the time of her disappearance. In addition, the police noticed something strange with his device for recording working hours, which by law, all truck drivers had to have. Apparently, on the day of getting rid of the body, Stuart hid information about his movements, but then went to fulfill orders, forgetting to fill in this data. Thus, he had a gap in his working hours, and investigators were sure that during this period, he took Celine's body to that roadside. At his first interrogation, the man stated that he had nothing to do with the murder and had never given Celine a ride. However, after the police brought to the station another driver who identified him among similar men, Stuart changed his story. Now he claimed that he had indeed agreed to give Celine a ride and had engaged in consensual, intimate relations with her. Regarding her things found in his garage, the suspect said that the girl had simply forgotten them when he dropped her off. Of course, investigators were in no hurry to believe this story. They continued to collect evidence against Stuart and found a witness who saw him the day before the body was found. The man was noticed near a warehouse about 80 kilometers from the place where the body was found. He made a fire next to his truck and was burning something. When the police asked what he was doing there, Stuart said that he was trying to warm up the brakes of his truck, which had frozen due to weather conditions, using the fire. The police went to that warehouse and soon found Celine's underwear folded under the fence, which had the girl's blood on it. Having put together all the available information, the investigators formed the most likely chronology of what happened. When Stuart agreed to give the girl a ride, he drove to a deserted place and raped her, then killed her. Then, based on the traces of blood in his truck, he could have been carrying the body on the lower bunk in his cab for 10 days, calmly fulfilling orders. Moreover, a week after the murder, he came home for Christmas, where he celebrated the holiday with his wife and children, while Celine's body was just a few meters away from them. After that, he decided to get rid of the body by cutting it into pieces. This was evidenced by the fact that Stuart had bought a shovel, an axe, and a saw. However, the man for some reason abandoned this idea and dumped the body near the side of the road. Finally, detectives learned that the day after Christmas, Stuart had given 2 bottles of that same champagne to a friend of his. The suspect claimed that he had bought them from a French truck driver, but investigators did not believe his words. It is noteworthy that the police managed to find out one more curious fact. They learned that Stuart had always worn a beard, but had completely shaved it off after killing the girl. When the composite sketch of the suspect began to actively flash in the news, It is also worth noting that the police were able to establish why Celine failed to get through to her cousin when she wanted to ask him to come for her. It turned out that shortly before all these events, telephone codes had changed in Britain, and the girl's notebook had his number with the old code written down. Apparently, she did not know about this innovation and dialed the outdated number. For Stuart's family, friends, and colleagues, what was happening came as a real shock. They all considered Stuart an exemplary family man and a good comrade, and at first many of them even refused to believe in his involvement. Only after information about all the evidence found appeared in the media did they realize what a monster he really was. Stuart's trial began in October of the same year, and he continued to deny everything, but with such a set of evidence, the jury quickly came to a unanimous decision. Stuart was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with the right to early release after a minimum of 20 years. Immediately after that, he tried to challenge the sentence, insisting that the wide publicity of the case had played against him and he had not received a fair trial. However, the Court of Appeal rejected his petition. Stuart tried to get a retrial again in 2006, but he failed this time too. In 2016, the time came to file a petition for early release, but the judge refused to release him. He justified this by the fact that in all those 20 years, Stuart had never confessed to what he had done and continued to insist that he had nothing to do with the murder. In addition, he believed that the man still posed a danger to society. Currently, the criminal is still in prison, and in the foreseeable future, he is unlikely to be released. Finally, I would like to add that Stuart was not involved in other murders that occurred in the same part of Britain. They were committed by another truck driver who was caught at the end of 1997. Although the prosecution was able to prove only 2 murders, they still believe that the man could have been involved in other unsolved crimes. As for Stuart himself, investigators also doubted that Celine was his only victim, but in all this time, they have not been able to find any evidence linking him to other cases. Share your opinion about this story in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.